Hey guys, today we are talking about a new game that just entered early access on Steam called Hyper Light Breaker. Now, this has had a lot of hype surrounding it in the indie game community because this dev's previous game, Hyper Light Drifter, was a big success, and they kind of changed up the formula for this one. A lot of people are saying that this is a lot like Risk of Rain 2, and I'd say that cannot be farther from the truth. There's actually very few similarities that this game shares with Risk of Rain 2, aside from maybe like art style, but definitely no similarities in terms of power fantasy or even just basic gameplay. I think what this game has going for it is pretty unique, and honestly, it's conceptually a great idea. There's a lot of good and bad that comes with this game, though, at least in early access at launch. And we're going to talk about all that here, but first I kind of want to cover the fundamentals of the game and show you what it's all about before we start talking about the good and the bad. First of all, the point of the game is to kill all of the bosses on a procedurally generated map every cycle by collecting these resources called prisms. That's what you see on screen right now that I got from killing this elite enemy. Now you need these prisms in order to challenge bosses, and once all bosses are dead, a cycle will be completed. Or you can die 4 times, which is my next topic, death. Once you die in this game, you lose a revive, or as this game calls it, a res. You also lose charges on your gear. As you're seeing right now, I am losing 1 charge on all of my gear items, and if you run out of charge, they just disappear, and you gotta go into your next run without that specific gear item. Now, you have 4 of these by default, and once all 4 of them run out, your cycle changes. Death pertains to your character. Cycles pertain to the world. The world will remain the same when you die, but when a cycle changes, the world will also change. When you die, you will return to the Cursed Outpost, which serves as your central hub area where you can interact with vendors, upgrade gear, get meta progression, etc. We will talk about all of that later on. You can also just jump right back into your run. You can gear up again if you want, because it is an extraction game. Stuff you take out can be put on later. You can gear up, jump back in, and things might be a tiny bit different within the same cycle. Like you might have different monster spawns, like the location of them or type of them. But as far as points of interest go and the actual environment itself, it will remain identical when you're within the same cycle. Now, once you run out of revives or reses, you will have a cycle be completed. I say completed and not end because it's not always a negative thing. It's kind of crazy. We'll talk about this later, but you basically get rewarded for dying, which I do not like at all. You know, spoilers for the end of the video. We're going to talk about that.
Did not hold back.
But the completion of cycles kind of gives you a performance review at the end of it. Like right now, they are giving me an end of cycle report, kind of score you for how well you performed during that cycle, and then the points you receive get turned into progress towards meta progression materials. End of cycle report. Now, as far as meta progression goes, it is kind of obnoxious because I think they have a lot of things that you should have available to you at the beginning of the game locked behind meta progression, which, reminding you, requires you to die 4 separate times or completely beat all the bosses in the game, which you're not doing. Sorry, I don't care if you're a god gamer. It's not happening unless you have some of these meta progression items, one of which is a med kit. You do not have manual healing capabilities accessible to you until you complete a cycle, which, you know, we'll talk about this later. I think it's crazy. We'll talk about it later. But this is basically what you can spend it on. They're called gold foils in the top right here. You can use them on things like med kits, you know, stamina, I guess, hover and glider time. You can get more slots. So like if you take an upgrade, it takes up EXE slots, as you can see in the bottom left there. And you can spend these same meta materials to add more slots to you. So if I hit E here, now I can put on one more thing that only costs 1. Now you can get a generous amount of these. At least it looks like a generous amount here. We got 5 of these. This takes a lot of time to unlock these though. And unfortunately, my time with the game is coming to a halt until they update it further. Again, we can talk about this later. So I'm probably not going to unlock all these, but you can see them all. A lot of them seem pretty trivial and not necessary, but some of them seem absolutely essential, like medkits. You get one at tier 1, and then you get another at tier 4. You know, you get things like spawning in with a key every cycle, which keys are very important. You do more damage with flash steps. These all seem like things that you should just have access to right off the bat. You know, maybe rarer equipment find, that's something I can see, you know, justify being meta progression. Maybe doing a little bit more damage for every piece of gear with the same status effect. I understand that could be meta progression. That seems like something that isn't essential, but just makes your runs better. This seems essential. Medkits are essential. Things like blocking projectiles with parries, that kind of seems essential. Vault space, I guess I can see that being tied to there too. So yeah, that's kind of what you can use with meta progression. But on top of that, you can unlock vendors, and these vendors have little relationship bonuses that you can also increase by giving them gold foils, the meta progression material we're talking about. And the first one is essential for all of them. You do not have the ability to upgrade your gear past level 1 until you get the first tier of affinity with every vendor. Now you have 3 vendors. This guy is your melee vendor. This guy over here is your gun vendor. They're called rails in this game. And then this guy over here is like your upgrade vendor. He has your mods. Now this guy doesn't have something where you can upgrade mods, but you can purchase them. Same with like amps and shields. So armor, shield obviously gives you stats that are defensive. Amps are like active abilities that you can spawn. And then you have regular upgrades called holobytes. We can talk about all of this right now, actually. This game is a little awkward for me to get footage on because there is no pause mechanic in the game whatsoever. I kind of just had to record on the fly, so you're going to get a weird mix of post-commentary with live commentary. But right now we're on our way to show you how to get those holobytes, which are your main upgrade form. You got to get these from mobbing. It's your real only reason to mob. Once you have all of your holobytes, it's better to run away from all mobs, as all they do is serve as a threat to your HP. You don't really get any benefits out of it. But this is what a normal combat scenario will look off. It is heavily melee focused. The game does present guns to you as a viable method, but truthfully, guns serve very little purpose, at least in the early game here. But whenever you kill mobs, you do have a chance of getting these little cards to drop, so I'll take it from here. So these are upgrades that you find. They're called holobytes, and you get them from killing ads. Or like mobs around the map. Sometimes they just randomly drop. And, they are your main upgrade form that you would see in a regular roguelike / roguelite. They are kind of run-defining things that you can get. One sec. And they do kind of just drop randomly from mobbing. And now this is the only reason to kill mobs, in my opinion. We will talk about that later on. But these are actually some pretty good holobytes that I got. Blades are what they refer to as all melee weapons. So I'll just take the Micron Edge because this one seems very strong. But you can hold up to 5 of these. So here's your holobytes up in the top here. And you can see they each have charges associated with them. So whenever you die, you do lose a charge. So my Marathon Pin, unless I delete this to make room for another holobyte, it has 2 more charges in it, meaning I can die 2 more times before this thing disappears. You also have a blade, which is your melee weapon, and a rail, which is your gun. You have a armor that you can run, and then you also can run something called an amp in this slot, which is kind of like an active ability that you have, as well as a psychom, which is kind of like your archetype that you're running. Right now, everyone has access to Gunslinger. You can spend some meta progression materials to unlock Tank, which is more melee focused, which I actually recommend because melee is way more important than guns in this game. And then down here, you have a list of all your items that you found in this run. Next, we'll talk about the extraction process. Now, the reason you would want to extract is so that you don't die, which, would seem intuitive, but the only benefit you actually get from extracting is preserving your gear. If you are not concerned about getting your gear out of the mission, I actually just recommend you die, because at least you're making progression towards another cycle to get some of that sweet, sweet meta progression currency. Usually whenever you do decide to extract, it's because you're low on HP. But don't worry, if you are low on HP, the extraction does indeed provide you with a sizable amount of HP to protect yourself, because in order to extract, you need to fend off against a few waves of enemies. We can take this opportunity to talk about the combat as well. We're going to talk about melee first. So melees have light attacks, heavy attacks, a special ability, and a dash attack. Now you're going to see me use my special ability. It's bound to my E on keyboard and mouse. That was it right there. It's a really nice AoE attack. Now, each different melee weapon has a unique version of this. They actually did put a lot of effort into making sure that the weapons are unique, whether it be a gun or a melee weapon. But melee weapons, I say they're way more important because they do not require a resource to use. Now, there is no ammo in this game. Instead, what it is it's called battery. And I believe it recharges through attacking or through maybe just like over time. I know you can find battery, like enemies can drop battery, you can get holobytes that give battery back on damage, and you can find battery in crates. But unfortunately, the game is not clear on how to acquire this resource without a specific piece of gear boosting your chances at getting it. So I just assume it regens over time through dealing damage and from dropping from enemies. Okay, so that's the basics of the game covered. Let's talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly now. The good. The aesthetic is phenomenal. I mean, just take a look around. This all looks beautiful. It speaks for itself. I've talked about it earlier. It just looks beautiful. The audio is phenomenal. I mean, the way that the weapons sound, the background ambience music is great. The enemy sound design is awesome. I also love how unique it is. Like, each weapon is pretty unique as far as I've seen. I've probably played with like 5 or 10 different weapons. Definitely not all of them, but they are all unique as far as I can see, as far as animations with melee weapons, attack patterns with guns, special unique abilities. And they can all have affixes too, as you would expect in a normal roguelike. Those are honestly great. And I think conceptually, this game's intended gameplay loop is really strong too. But as you're seeing right now, it just kind of falls apart. So now we're going to kind of get into the bad here. There are a lot of optimization issues with the game. I was incredibly lucky and my game was playable. And by that, I mean it wasn't crashing. I wasn't having any kind of like artifacting in the game. I wasn't having any kind of visual bugs or audio bugs like a lot of other people were, especially in my chat on day one. Hopefully that all gets resolved very quickly. I can kind of look past bugs as long as they're addressed in a timely manner, because that's not something that's indicative of a game's lifespan. I did have a pretty massive bug though, like I wasn't able...
So good
right here, look. Hold on, can I do this instead? I had to do a workaround for upgrades, because I was not able to replace upgrades. I would have to delete a holobyte if I wanted to replace it. If I wanted to replace it, it would just delete the holobyte that I was trying to put on instead of actually replacing it, meaning that I was locked into my builds until I discovered the workaround of just deleting your current holobytes. That's not how it's supposed to be. That's not intended. That was just a pretty massive bug that I had to I had to find out a workaround for. Also, combat, while incredibly fun, is incredibly broken. It is very clear to me that this was designed around 1v1 combat. The boss fights are incredible. I like fighting mini-bosses. I like fighting the elites when there's not a lot of mobs around. When there are a lot of enemies on screen, though, fights seem extremely tough. I do not think it is intended for it to be that tough. It kind of feels like artificial difficulty, because while you do have tools to deal with more than one enemy, you are not equipped to deal with more than 3, 4, or 5 enemies at the same time, especially if it's a mix of ranged and combat units. Melee units.
They have a really cool
Also, keys are a mandatory resource that you need in order to get some prisms, and prisms are how you progress your game to the point where you can kill the final boss. Completely arbitrary on how you get them. I don't think there's a guaranteed way to get them. If you know a guaranteed way, let me know in the comments below. Maybe I was just bugged, but I spent hours looking for them, hitting up all points of interest and going mobbing. Could not get more than 1 to drop. It was tragic. On top of that, mobbing is pointless. When you think of a roguelike, you think of grinding out, whether it's going to be like levels, items, through mobbing. You do that in Risk of Rain, do that in other stuff. There's no reason to go mobbing in this game whatsoever after you get all 5 holobytes. If you're happy with your 5 holobytes, you're good. If there's ever a mob, run away. All they serve as is a way to lower your HP, and you get 0 value on your investment. Your investment being killing the mobs. Here, you're seeing me kill a mob right here. This is a semi-high tier ad right here as well. You know, it doesn't get one shot. It does put up a fight and can severely hurt me. Let's see what I get out of it. Oh, literally nothing aside from a pitiful amount of currency that we can use at base when we get back. For a game that prides itself on exploration above all else, only points of interest are of value to the player. Also, this right here is a shrine. You need to spend an obnoxious amount of currency to refill your med kit, by the way. Another currency that can only be achieved arbitrarily. Also, a good build is mandatory, which it's a roguelite, so you know, builds are important and everything, but usually in other games, you can take a mediocre build all the way as long as you're making up for its shortcomings in player skill. Here, though, that is not the case. Here, a god build is essential. It is mandatory for you to have legendary gear and to be good at the game. Now, it is kind of easy to achieve this because it's an extraction game, so if you don't have a good build, you can always just go back to town until you finally get good loot. But that breeds a really bad gameplay loop where the meta play is to go in and immediately extract until your vendors back at town get lucky. That's a boring way to play, and unfortunately, if the most boring way to play is also the smartest way to play, that's going to hurt the game a lot in the future. Alright, so I've mentioned a lot of issues with the game, but let's talk about something else that was really concerning for me, and it's the fact that I had to buy a bundle in order to play this. You can't get Hyper Light Breaker by itself. Click this, where does it take you? Right to the same page, because I'm looking at the Hyper Light Breaker page. Currently no way to play this game without a bundle, so $30 for early access, which is really expensive for a product like this, for a game that's this size. $30 is up there. And I don't even think we have enough content here to call it early access, in my opinion. Not only do we not have enough content, but the content that's currently in the game is not functional or high quality enough to justify it entering early access. This all kind of comes off as a really bad faith cash grab, but who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. I would love to be wrong, because contrary to what it might sound like right now, I do really like this game. I would not be making a video like this about the game if I didn't want it to succeed, because I do have a lot of fun with it. And I think conceptually it's a great idea that's unique and hasn't been done before. And I really want them to seize the opportunity to realize how good of an idea this is for a game, and I want them to perfect it, make it something that I'm going to enjoy playing. But I just fear that if I keep playing, any potential love I would have for this game would just be replaced with utter frustration and disappointment. So I know that's a bit harsh, but let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I'm really upset about how this game turned out, but hopefully the devs can bring it back pretty quickly, because I do think the issues that I talked about in this video can be resolved. The game is definitely in a redeemable state. It is not irredeemable. And I hope that happens. But yeah, let me know what you guys thought about the game if you tried it, and let me know what you think about potential ways that they can fix it for themselves. You guys have a great day. I'm Hatterax, signing off. Peace.